Morning, everybody. We're here on a Woodlands application, and particularly application 001 of 2022, filed by Mackie Rombouts of Cortrudy Farms Limited. First item of business is to appoint a chair. Do I have a mover and a seconder on a appointment of a chair? So I've got Councillor Arnold.
I'd like to move that we nominate our Deputy Warden, Bev Hand, as the chair of this meeting.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Marriott. Bev Hand, I will ask the question, but I think this is an issue of servitude. Do you accept that nomination?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Arnold. You got your hand up before I did.
All right, so then we will proceed to, before I pass it off to Deputy Warden Hand, we'll proceed to, and proceed to item number 2, which is the application itself. We'll introduce everybody on the line. Mr. Rombouts, my name is Stefan Svo. I'm the head of corporate services, clerk, and the solicitor for the county here. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. And of course, we've got Warden Kevin Marriott, the Warden of Lamprey County, Deputy Warden Bev Hand, of course, Deputy Warden, and of course, Councillor Steve Arnold, who is also Mayor of St. Clair. Ms. Hand is Mayor of Point Edward, and of course, Mr. Marriott is also Mayor of Enniskillen. Also on the line with us today is Tim Payne. You've probably met Tim Payne. He's our conservation officer, and he will be speaking to this matter after you have done. So also on the line is Ken Melanson. Ken Melanson is our head of our planning group, where Mr. Payne, to whom Mr. Payne reports to ultimately. And you'll see also Terry Dewsbury, who's within our group downstairs, and she's here. She takes the notes and minutes of this proceeding. You'll see on the screen Council Chambers. Council Chambers only serves as the machine, the computer that broadcasts this meeting on our YouTube channel, and Lisa Legatti is the individual who controls that. So I want to introduce everybody and all of their roles before I pass it off now to Chair Hand to address the application.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow. Sorry. So we'll move on to the first application, W00122, Cortrudy Farms. I hope I'm saying that properly. And item A is an application for exemption. B is the notice of the public meeting. C is the report, and D is the field assessment.
Okay, so Chair Hand, in terms of proceedings, we will hear first from Mr. Rombouts as the applicant. You have the opportunity to speak to your application. Following your information, Mr. Payne will respond on behalf of his position. And then lastly, given that you're the applicant, Mr. Rombouts, you of course get the last word, the reply, and we'll proceed with that. So Mr. Rombouts, you're up.
Hey, thank you all of you for your time this morning. I appreciate it. I'm not very good at these Zoom meeting things. I don't do this very often, but so I guess, a few things that I would like to clarify or potentially clarify, I guess, in the application is the exact acreage. And maybe I just read it wrong. I never had a chance to get a hold of Tim after, but it was, again, we're doing this by satellite, so 25-ish acres, give or take, that we're looking at total. But with the tile drainage through it, it's actually about 15 and a half acres. After the drainage paths are made, or however we go about doing that, it's not a full. I do believe it said 22 acres in the application of clearing. It's not actually 22. I hope I'm saying that right. But it's closer to 15 and a half, I do believe. And the other part, I guess, that again, I should have called Tim about this ahead of time, that Tim Tim and I had talked about was that in this area that I would like to get back into trees, of this very flood prone, very erosion prone ground, that I volunteered, and I would like to, if we went that route. I've got the equipment, I've got the means, I've got what we need to do, that I can build any berms, I can dig any ponds, create wildlife habitat, etc. That I am more than willing to do any of that work at my own cost in those properties, depending on what the Conservation Authority deems to be the best thing to do in those areas. Again, they know that stuff better than I do, so I'd leave that to them. That's about all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Rumboats. Any questions from members of the panel? I'll leave it for Chair Hand to
Sorry, Mayor Arnold.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just maybe this will come out when Tim does his, but I was just wondering how big this farm actually is and how many acres of bush total on this piece of property. Because I know that we used to look for percentages when we were looking at woodlot cover throughout the county. I'm just wondering what the percentage of existing woodlot cover is on this piece of property at this time.
This particular property, it's a conventional 100 acres, I guess a long 100 is what they call it. Okay. So it is 100 acres. There's 41 workable at this time. I never actually measured that exactly, but there's approximately 10 acres at the front that is where there's a ravine through and a creek, and more scrub brush than actual any trees for the most part. And then the back would be, again, approximately almost 50 acres, I guess, 45, 50 acres, I guess, at the back.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have a question. I'm fairly new to this process. And my question is regarding Mr. Rumboats. You said that you had an idea of some redoing the fields with some bermage and berms and a pond and things like that, but you hadn't talked to Mr. Payne about it.
Tim and I did talk about it when he was here before. I guess that would have been before Tim did the site assessment. Tim and I went back to the property, but Tim did his full assessment, I think, about a week after that. But Tim and I did talk about that and talk about the possibility of berms. And Tim had, and I forget, Tim might be able to answer this. You had an idea of some type of tiered drainage or something. I forget how you termed that. But yeah, it's just something to do to stop the water from flowing straight across the field when we get the large floods, just to slow the flow down and stop the dirt from moving, basically.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if Mr. Payne had that information prior to writing the report. Is there any other questions? Okay, then I'll ask Mr. Payne to talk now, please.
Thank you.
Regarding your report.
Thank you, Chair Hand. Yeah, so with regards to the acreage, if you look at the report and you go down to the maps that were provided, so through the Woodlands Conservation Bylaw, there is a caveat or an exemption for the purpose of tiling. It's understood that farming and agriculture practices do require drainage, so that the current agriculture land to the north of the woodlot has some drainage issues. So a survey was completed by Mr. Rumboats' tile contractor, and it was determined in the first map there that that's how they can get the water away from the agriculture land to the north of the woodland. So looking at that, Mr. Rombout's discussed the potential of removing the entire area, as he owns the lands to the east and west of that. So that's where we looked at the exemption process. So when we're looking at this, the original drainage removal would be approximately 4.4 acres. Mr. Rombouts has requested a width of 140 feet or 42.6 meters, which is a little wide. When you look at the OMAFRA websites and things like that, they're talking anywhere from 50 to 100 feet, depending on species, because of roots getting into the tiles. That being non-perforated, there still is potential some issue. However, Mr. Rombout's equipment is, I think he said, 130 feet wide, so therefore being able to do 140-foot swath through those would allow him to maintain over his tile drains. So then if we go to the second map in the report, application request for 26 acres. Again, as Mr. Rombouts pointed out, this was a GIS exercise, so I got 26 acres, he had gotten 25. Subtracting the 3.3 acres for the existing tile that's already going through, which is marked in orange there, we get 22.7 acres. You're either, and this is my opinion, you're either applying for an exemption through tile, which would be the first map, or you're applying for an exemption for the entire area. So that is why there was no deduction for the other tile, because that will change those. If he's able to remove all that, that will all be tiled, and those two tile requests in the previous map would be void, basically. So that's where the discrepancy in acreage, I think, comes from. If we look at map 3 of the report, options discussed. So again, trying to work with the farmers and landowners on the landscape, understanding that agriculture requires drainage and farm equipment for efficient farming requires straight lines. So we did discuss the option of potentially just taking that north end off of that woodland and creating a straight line that way. Mr. Rombouts acknowledged the option and preferred to continue with his application to remove the whole area. When it comes to compensation, the county requests, they're looking for no net loss. So for every acre removed, the county would like to see 1 acre put back. And that can be done in 2 ways or a combination. So first, the landowner can replant the same acreage of land on that property or another property in which they own, or they can pay to the county in lieu fee of $5,000 per acre, which goes into a separate woodlands compensation account. It's not used to offset anything else through county operations. It's earmarked specifically for reforestation, afforestation in the county of Lambton. So then when there are landowners that are looking to plant trees, it's basically used like a grant to subsidize the cost of their planting. Or you can do it in a combination. So for example, if you were approved for 10 acres, you could plant 5 acres and pay in lieu for 5 acres or a portion thereof. So then Mr. Rombouts, in the field assessment report, there is a final map, the last page, showing the compensation area. So that was discussed that, yes, that is lowland marginal area that floods. We did discuss some erosion issues that may be addressed. I'm not sure in some cases that straight tree planting will address some of the erosion going up into some of the agriculture land. That being said, you know, we have two things here. We have the application request for exemption, excuse me, and then the compensation piece. So the farms that Mr. Rombouts owns certainly have marginal land that could be farmed. You know, we're all learning that marginal land and flooding prone land and things like that would be best to certainly take out of agriculture. And it's understood that compensation is not required, or does not allow for any grants. So whether Mr. Rombouts does the work on his own or hires a contractor, he will be subject to any of the costs to do any of the compensation himself regarding who does the work or the cost of it. I think that maybe explains everything. If there's any other questions.
Mayor Arnold?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple of questions for Mr. Payne. Thanks, Tim. Great report. It was very explanatory and that sort of thing. But is it the drain that comes across there, and I can't remember the name of it. This comes right through essentially the bottom third of the woodlot, the existing woodlot. Is that all tile that goes right across there, Tim?
Yes, Mr. Rombouts, I think 2 years ago, applied for an exemption for tiling because he owns the land to the east and west.
To the east as well. Okay,
yes.
Okay.
So in order to drain and tie into that municipal drain, there was a request to do that tile. So that was a previous approval for tile drainage.
So, Mr. Payne, if I could do a follow-up, from that existing main that goes across, and I'm going to call the top of my drawing here, my top of my picture, the north. From that existing piece north, how many acres would that be of woodlot there? Would it be 10 acres or 12 acres maybe altogether?
Yeah, at least 10, maybe 12 in there, I would guess.
Okay. Well, as an old farm guy, I'm looking at the pictures of the woodlots that's there, and I would think if we had an organized woodlot on some of these other marginal lands, I wouldn't have a problem with, and it's just my opinion, of course, of removing from the tile the existing main to the north and then relocating that material over onto these marginal lands that you'd spoken about, Tim. I agree with you. If the more of those marginal lands that we can put into tree cover, the better we'll have for flooding issues and everything else. And being that's already an existing tile going across there, I'm just wondering, is that something that you looked at yourself, Tim, when you were out? And if I could get an opinion on that possibility while we're looking at this.
I did not look at the possibility of removing south to the drain, only because during discussions we were talking about straight lines.
Okay.
We did discuss that the option of the just over 6 acres across the north end, but no, we never did. It just never came up.
Madam Chair, could I ask Mr. Rombouts if that's something that he would be interested in?
Yes,
because
sir.
I'm pretty sure he knows what the recommendation is
Yeah.
that we have in front of us, right? So,
Right. Please do.
Yep. Yeah, it's nothing that I actually, as Tim said, just didn't come up. Never really thought of that option, to be honest, because it doesn't really give you still have the corners on either side of that area where you have to turn in the east field and also in the west field, which, yeah, basically we're just trying to avoid that, right, for spray overlap, seed overlap, all those other things. And I guess maybe, not that this was the question you asked, I would potentially be interested in that, but I would prefer straight lines. And the reason you had asked about that drain going through there, and Tim mentioned about that we applied for that a couple of years ago. Just to clarify, I did not own this farm at the time. So that was drainage to go through a neighbor's farm, actually. So that's why there was different types of all of this. Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chair, the reason why I asked that about going from the edge to the south to the existing drain, I realize it's not the ideal, but it's kind of a hybrid between the two. It actually keeps a retention on that actual farm of so many acres of existing, albeit it is kind of a scrubby woodlot, but at least it'd give it a chance to rejuvenate while Mr. Rumbouts was bringing the other stuff up along the marginal land. And I just wonder if that would be an acceptable trade-off. And I hope I'm not out of line by suggesting that, Madam Chair, but I'm trying to find something that's a real positive win-win, not only for Mr. Rumbouts, but for all the farmland around that, where that drain comes out into that more of a creek area with the marginal land around it. I'm hoping for a win-win if that's all right. And, you know, it's been quite a while since I've been on the Woodlot Committee, so I know things change over time. I'm just wondering, is that something, Madam Chair, through yourself to Tim, that we could maybe entertain if the landowner is okay with that?
So, Mr. Payne, can you comment back to the proposal?
Yes, at this point, I would say this is with the Woodlands Hearings Board. I've presented my reports and recommendations. So if the hearings board feels that there's other alternatives that can be reached with the applicant, that would be your privy and approval option.
Okay. Is that something, Mr. Payne, that you feel you could possibly support if it's all right with the landowner?
Warden Marriott wants to make a comment, so maybe I'll get that comment before.
Madam Chair, I can only see the person speaking on my.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to get.
I apologize.
No problem. I'd just like to get his comment before, then we'll go back to Mr. Payne for his.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my only question is, if that option was considered, the replant acres where is it situated again compared to this farm? Is it across the road or something? Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering, in feet, would it be? And it's marginal land, correct?
Yeah, very, very marginal land. We've got the one area where it washed out this year. It's probably 4 feet deep. We got a washout through it, so it's very marginal land. Okay.
So I guess, yeah, and feet wise, would it be less than 1,000 feet from this area?
It's the farm directly to the north. So Zion line is the only thing splitting the farms. So footage wise, it's probably a little more than 1,000 feet.
Okay.
Because I think a farm is 4,000 feet long, is it not? So we're
Yes.
roughly middle of farm to middle of farm. So it's probably about 4,000 feet.
Okay. Just trying to get a mental image if the option was considered more seriously here. So thank you for that.
Okay. I'll turn it back to Mr. Payne now for comments on this option that is suggested by Mayor Arnold.
Yes. I guess ultimately though that goes to the Woodlands Hearings Board. So if the Woodlands Hearings Board therefore approves it, that's where it sits.
I guess if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just a comment. The reason why I thought the piece south of the existing drain to leave it on, I wouldn't like to see the farm have zero woodlot on it at all. That's why I thought that this would kind of be a hybrid. We would still retain some woodlot on that existing farm south of the Zion line, as well as enhance what's to the north of Zion line. So I guess my question back through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Rumboats is if that would be something that he could, that he would be willing to support as the landowner.
Mr. Rumboats?
Yeah, so as far as long as I'm understanding how you're saying that, from the land from the south of that existing tile, keeping that there, if we did what was proposed, we would still have, again, Tim can correct me if I'm wrong on this, we would still have 10 to 12 acres or maybe a bit more. If we went in a straight line, there would still be 10 to 12 acres. It wouldn't be zero bush. I just want to clarify that there still would be a good chunk of bush if we went straight. But yes, I would be interested in entertaining that idea. Again, I would prefer to go straight if we could, but yeah.
Understandable. I guess Mr. Rumboat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Warden.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to clarify that too. I understood before that there would be some woodlot left, even if it would be to the north. If what Mr. Rumboats wanted was granted, there would still be. So you're saying 10 to 15 acres. I don't know if Tim has a comment on that or not. Go ahead, Mr. Rumboats.
Yeah, so I'm just quickly adding it up here. So the 42, I never did this before, sorry. The 42 plus approximately 42, 41 that's there now, plus approximately 25 would be around 67 acres, roughly. That would be workable on the farm. Therefore, there would still be 33 acres of covered ground. I'm going to say approximately 50% of that would be on the north end of the farm, 50% of that would be on the south end. So there'd be, ballpark 15 to 16 acres on the north and south end of the farm if we went with the straight through proposal. Again, those are rough numbers. Just going on GIS, right? But
Oh, Mr. Payne, do you have any more comments?
No, that's correct. If you were to refer to the field assessment report, the second map with the blue circle around it will show the area and the rough property boundary. So there would be, again, as Mr. Rambo said, approximately 15 acres of woodlot still to the south.
If I may ask another question then to Mr. Payne, like the reason for not recommending this and going with the replant on the marginal land, I'm just curious what you've seen as the drawbacks to allowing Mr. Rumboats that if it was bringing more marginal land into bush lot. I just was curious what the negatives of this would be. Sorry, whether it was doing what Mr. Rumboats wanted or whether we did what Mr. Arnold wanted with leaving a section there. But is that marginal land that's proposed for replanting? Just curious on that, if you don't mind commenting on that.
Sure. So certainly we can discuss the current woodlot. As mentioned in the reports, it's part of a big woodlot complex. Certainly, starting a new woodland from seedlings versus an older existing woodlot, that's apples and oranges from an ecological perspective, wildlife, water quality, quantity, all that kind of stuff. At this point, we certainly are at a lower end of the scale for woodlands in Lambton County. Certainly not as much as Essex or Chatham-Kent for sure, but still on the low end. It's sometimes there is an exemption process to the woodlands bylaw, so this application in process is allowed. That being said, we're trying to reach the best of both worlds by preserving woodlands and accommodating the agriculture industry in Lambton County. With regards to the compensation area, agreed, marginal land, that's certainly a target area. When it comes to rehabilitation, restoration, all that, A1 quality tiled agriculture land is not necessarily the target in a farming community for that type of work. So certainly key areas are marginal land. That being said, through the Conservation Authority, the province, the federal government, there are lots of grants out there available to landowners to retire that land at no cost, as well as Alice Lambton. The Alice Canada Lambton chapter does provide a review process and allow for compensating landowners for taking marginal land out of production. So I think there's enough availability to do restoration with very little out of a landowner's pocket already. But certainly, the willingness to compensate is there rather than continuing to farm that land. But again, an existing woodlot versus starting brand new, the same values aren't there.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I guess to get the marginal land trees growing, it would take probably 10 to 20 years to get it anywhere close to. Well, not even that would get it. But yeah, I see what you're saying. It's the time lapse from getting the new growth caught up to what's being removed. That's the main reason for not recommending that, I guess.
Yeah, certainly, we're it's providing water, take up water. It's taking up water with the quantity and quality of water. Larger trees, smaller trees, closed canopy, forest floor vegetation, the ecosystem that's there versus planting brand new, putting in the rows and waiting for crown closure and species diversity and even carbon sequestration, all that kind of stuff. It will certainly take it'll take a long time for those seedlings to have the same impact as that woodlot.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. So we move forward to the recommendation then. I don't know. Sorry, Mr. Rombutts?
Yeah, would I be able to, I just had a couple of points that I jotted down as the conversation was going here, if I may. So I agree with Tim 100% as far as the new growth versus old growth, et cetera. We are, there's definitely apples to oranges there. There's no doubt about that. So we, as I mentioned previously, we had done this in 2017, we had done basically the same type of a deal, acre for acre, planted some marginal land back. As I said before, the Conservation Authority knows their stuff. I can plant corn. I don't know as much as I'd like to know about trees. But I left it up to them as far as species, et cetera, and we planted a large area back into trees at that time. Like I say, that was 2017, and at the moment, and I really liked what they did. They varied the species considerably, got some poplars in there to get some quick canopy growth, get things up and running. Some hardwoods mixed in between them to give them time to fill in. So that is now 5 years, and we maintained it until late this year. We couldn't get our bush hog, our 4-foot bush hog between the rows anymore. It is now a good chunk of that is almost full canopy, or very close to it. So, with that type of a system that the St. Clair Conservation put in, I don't think 20 years is necessarily the wrong number, Warden Marriott. I think you're probably fairly close on that, but I do believe it'd be getting close at 20 years to being comparable with a system that they implemented in this case. And in my opinion, I really like it. I really like it. It makes me happy every time I drive by that area to see those trees. It's the way it should be. Another point. So to Tim's point about the acreage for clearing, I guess I'm just a farmer. It just is what it is. I don't play games. It's just straightforward. The reason I guess that I applied for all of this at once instead of just a tile exemption and then going for the tree exemption afterwards was why waste everybody's time, right? This is ultimately what I'd like to do. So why goof around doing a tile exemption for the either 4 or 6 acres originally, and then a year from now apply for the whole thing? So I guess that's why I kind of lumped it all into one. And then so as far as acreage goes, yes, what I'm proposing, we would be well over an acre for an acre. We would be closer to an acre and a quarter for an acre of marginal land versus good farmland. And this is just, my opinion, squaring up the field, making things straight, etc. I think it's a win-win for the environment as far as I said before, chemical, seed, overlap, all those other things. I also believe that the trees in the marginal ground is obviously better for the environment. And as far as wildlife, etc. goes, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe that area around the creeks, especially if there's, some pond structures put in or something like that, I do believe that is as good or better area for wildlife as well. So those are just kind of some points that I thought of while we were in conversation here.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Any comments from anyone? Okay, as far as the recommendations, we have the report, but we also have a proposal. So I'm not sure how to entertain that.
If I may, you have 3 options really.
Yes.
Deal with the report as is and vote on that. 2, vote on the proposal, and before we vote on the proposal, I think we need to clarify it in reference to the pages of the report to make sure that everybody knows exactly what we're talking about in terms of the ultimate resolution. Or you could briefly adjourn. You can adjourn for a week or 2 or so for Tim Payne and Mr. Rombouts to have further discussions and come back with definite plans that are consistent with the proposal. So again, 3 options. 1 is to deal with the recommendations that is in Mr. Payne's report. 2 is to address the proposal today, as long as we go back to the reports and identify the properties in question by reference to the pages in the report, and then or 3, adjourn for further discussion and then bring in those discussions back so you can vote definitively on the last deal.
So just to comment that that's what I was thinking. It feels like, sorry, I'm losing my voice today. It feels like this was kind of sprung and we need to feather it out and have time to look at it and come back is a suggestion rather than making a quick decision. That's my opinion. Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chair Han. And it's almost would be, well, it would almost be nice to see it in person too, the marginal land. But I mean, it's hard to get a visual with aerial maps, but there's a lot of things to consider here. And I definitely, if this if this option is, if there's details that Mr. Rumbouts and Tim can work out, I'm open to that discussion going forward. I'm just curious, if ever that these options were granted, is there much logging that would happen before removal of boats? Is there, or Mr. Payne, you've probably seen the woodlot as well. Is there many large logs and trees there?
Through you, Chair Hand. Yes, there are some merchantable logs within the area. As part of this, we do suggest to the landowner to utilize as much of the wood as possible rather than just piling and burning it. So I would suspect that Mr. Rombouts would contact a logging contractor that would go in and remove that under the exemption permit. And I don't know, I couldn't say how much revenue would be in there, but there would be some saleable logs in that area. So if Mr. Rombouts is in agreement with the option to remove only to the existing drain, that's a calculation of acreage and then agreed upon compensation with Mr. Rombouts.
Thank you for that, Tim, because it is disconcerting to see woodlot that's pushed up in a pile and burnt. That there's nothing that bothers me more than seeing that.
Mr. Rombouts?
Yeah, to expand on what Warden Marriott's question and Tim's reply there. My sons have a firewood business. They sell a lot of firewood to the Warwick Conservation Area and also Alvinston and Petrolia Conservation Area. Anything that is non-merchantable, which as per Tim's report, it's very predominantly soft maple, and they're pretty well the only trees in there that are close to big enough for saleable logs. So it would basically be some soft maple that would be sold out. Anything beyond that, if it's able to be cut into firewood, it would be firewood. We also have an outdoor wood stove on our property that we heat the house and the workshop with as well. So there would be, other than stumps and some small branches, there wouldn't be much left in a burn pile.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mayor Arnold?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess what I was looking at was, I agree with Warden Marriott. Maybe we could refer this back to have Tim meet with Mr. Rombouts and work out possibly another option. I'd also like to see it fleshed out more why the denial for the original application, the 22.5 acres, was put forward. And I may have missed it in the report, but I didn't see, and I guess I need to go back through the report as well, just to see exactly why, instead of letting Mr. Rumbouts do the square and take it straight across, then we were going to just deny the whole application other than the 2 runs or the tile going back through that scrubby bush lot. So I think there's a couple other things that I'd like to see looked at as well. But what I was proposing that we would do was go from the woodlot beginning south to the existing Fuchspa drain that goes across, cuts that bush lot in about 1/3, 2/3. So if I can, I would like to make a motion to table this report until we have further information through Mr. Payne and discussions with Mr. Rombouts.
Thank you. Mr. Rombouts?
Just one question for clarification, actually. I thought about it and I keep forgetting to ask. The original proposal was denied by Mr. Payne. Is that, I guess just for clarification in my own head, is that a denial of the whole proposal, or is that just the denial of the clearing of the 20-some acres? Or is that a denial of, or not a denial, that's the wrong word. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused, but is that that you would prefer that we do not do the whole project, i.e. clear the land and plant new trees, or is that just for clearing the land? I guess, was that all one, or was that two separate things?
Well, I think that's part of the discussion process between, if I may, Madam Chair, between yourself, Mr. Rumbouts, and Mr. Payne. And my thinking was that no matter what, I'd like to see the scrubby land put trees in it somehow. Whatever comes off of, comes out of woodlot, go into woodlot along that what you were proposing, Mr. Rumbout. I think the big thing for me is to understand the denial of the 22.7 acres total. What that was, other than the fact of wildlife habitat and the length of time for the regrowth. And that's why I was proposing kind of a hybrid, that we still maintain 8 or 12 acres to the south of where the drain goes across, and then yet allow you to have additional farmland, which makes sense because you're cutting up with the remnant parcel of bush anyways, or woodlot with the drains coming in, and then be able to have that marginal land taken out and make it into woodlot. So I think that's the discussion I'd like to see Mr. Payne and Mr. Rumbouts have, and that's why my motion should have been maybe fleshed out a little better, but that was my thinking, and just looking for additional information from Warden Marriott to see what his thoughts were.
Warden Marriott?
Yeah, thank you. And I would second your motion, Mayor Arnold, if you wanted to clarify the motion a bit more, but I think hopefully Mr. Payne is okay with going back and clarifying about that. But I think we know what you mean. If Mr. Tifo understands the motion.
Yes, I have it, and of course, Terry, Ms. Dewsbury is also keeping notes. But ultimately, the motion would be to table this until there's further discussions between Mr. Payne and Mr. Rombouts with respect to the original report and the reasons behind the original report for the recommendations that were provided in the original report, and if there's an alternative solution in keeping with today's discussion moving forward.
Perfect.
So you summarized that well.
Yeah, very well.
Mr. Payne, did you wanted to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Han. So just a little bit of clarification based on what Mr. Rambout said. So when we originally discussed things, it was for a tile exemption, which was located in the first map. Mr. Rombouts then wanted to do the full removal, and that's what the application is based on. So Mr. Rombouts applied to remove the whole area. So that is what my report and field assessment is based on. We did discuss the alternative of the 6 acres to the north, and Mr. Rombouts was still within his rights and determined that he would rather still apply for the full acreage. So if the hearings board was to go with my recommendation, then there would still be the option for Mr. Mackey to properly outlet his tiles on that farm. So it would not deny the tile portion, it would deny the entire removal of the area. So by all means, I am more than happy to discuss and come up with solutions. So to meet with Mr. Rombouts again and discuss some further options, that's fine. But those were my report and recommendations for your hearings board.
Thank you, and we appreciate your time, and we appreciate the fact that you've made a recommendation. I just feel like some other ideas came up today, so that we're going to table it, review it, and then come back. So take a little bit more time, but review the different options. So we're going to vote on that motion then. So all in favor? Okay, so we'll table it till the review of your ideas and suggestions. And I'll leave it up to Mr. Tipo to let us know when we come back together.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hand. On that question, while we're here, and given the nature of the work in question, what timelines are we looking at from a practical perspective in terms of working these lands, Mr. Rombos? What timelines are you facing?
So as far as doing any berms or et cetera that we need to do, and then getting trees planted in, it's maybe too late to order trees this year. But I mean, as far as getting those planted, I'm good with whatever St. Clair has for that. I mean, we can do that this spring already as far as that goes. As far as clearing the land. Yeah, that would probably be. I would like to maybe have, we would get going at it whenever the conditions are fit. I don't like making a mess. I don't like playing in the mud. You just wreck the land that way. But I would say, starting whenever we could and being done hopefully within 3 years.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, whenever we could, if the earliest of the whenever we could this year, that you're looking at May, June.
Yeah, I mean, right now, with the frost, we probably potentially could get in there, but it sounds like tomorrow that's going to be gone and be a mess. So yeah, May, June would be at the earliest for us, probably. Yes.
Okay, so Madam Chair, we'll provide Mr. Payne and Mr. Rombot some time to chat, and then attempt to schedule with everyone a second or continuation of this hearing. Of course, before this May, June period.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other questions or comments before we adjourn? Okay, thank you for coming today, Mr. Romboats and Mr. Payne. And sorry, Ken as well. I can't see you, Ken, but thank you for attending. So I need a motion to adjourn. Warden Marriott, seconder. Mr. Arnold, Mayor Arnold, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.